Welcome to Hello Therapy, a podcast to help you take charge of your mental health through evidence-based psychological tips and tools straight from the therapy room so that you can live life better. Do you ever feel like all you do is distract away from painful emotions rather than actually dealing with them? Or do you have a tendency to bottle feelings up and you really want to change that? I am Dr. Liz White, a consultant clinical psychologist and your host. And today I'm going to talk about some of the pitfalls of coping with emotions and what to do instead so that you can more effectively manage difficult emotions when they show up. And just a heads up, there is a brilliant freebie with this episode. It's my most downloaded resource and it's a free workbook and guide to managing difficult emotions. And I'll put the link in the show notes. Also, I have some news about the podcast. We are now on YouTube, so do head over and subscribe. We are at Harley Clinical. So back to the episode, emotions are part of the rich tapestry of human experience, and throughout our lives, there's no getting away from it. We will experience a whole range of feelings, some negative, some positive, and everything in between. Now, one of the most common pitfalls when dealing with difficult emotions is over-identifying with them. So if you're over-identifying with an emotion, it means that you feel that you are the emotion rather than just experiencing it. So for example, I am sad. Sadness is all of me. It's all I am. And it's natural to feel consumed by emotions when they're very strong or intense or very painful. But when we start to believe that that's all we are, just this emotion or the emotions we're feeling, it can lead to a sense of helplessness. And this can be really scary because it can feel very overwhelming when you're in that particular state of mind. But the thing to remember here is that emotions are just internal feelings that we experience, nothing more, nothing less. They do not define us. Now, to stress this point, I'm going to ask you right now to imagine yourself as a pizza. Okay, I know this sounds a bit weird, but stay with me. So any good pizza has that doughy base, then the tomato paste, and then obviously the mozzarella, and any other toppings of our choice, like ham, pineapple, pepperoni, and so on. So the base of the pizza, whilst it comes into contact with the toppings, it doesn't get mixed up with them. Now, like the base of the pizza, we have a part of ourselves that can observe our experiences, both internal and external experiences. And we can think of our internal experiences, i.e. our thoughts, our feelings, our physical sensations, as the toppings of the pizza. Each topping brings something different to the pizza. It brings a different flavor. Like each emotion we experience brings something different and allows for a richness to our lives. I mean, imagine if we only ever had one topping on our pizza for the rest of our lives, or only ever experiencing one emotion. It would get really boring very quickly. Now, going back to this idea of over-identifying with painful emotions, instead of getting consumed in this way, i.e. instead of getting all mixed up with the emotion, what's more helpful is observing and noticing the emotions. And a simple way to do this is by shifting from I am this feeling to I am having this feeling. So the next time a strong or painful emotion shows up, just notice it and simply say to yourself, I am having the feeling of X, whether that's sadness, whether that's frustration, anger, whatever it is, try and name it. So moving on to the second pitfall, bottling emotions up. Now, have you ever shaken a fizzy soda bottle I mean, it's the thing to do when you're a kid, right? So I think we've all probably done this, much to our parents' disdain, I'm sure. But what happens when we shake a fizzy bottle up? Well, it bursts, doesn't it? It goes everywhere and it makes a real mess. Now, bottling up strong emotions can be just like that. Eventually, the pressure builds up so much that it bursts. So ignoring or suppressing or pushing down your feelings may seem like a quick fix, but not allowing the release or the processing of the emotions will not be helpful in the long term. So here's the thing to remember: acknowledging and expressing our emotions is really crucial to managing them effectively. So finding healthy outlets to help process your feelings is really important. So some examples might be journaling, or if journaling feels a bit too much of a leap, just simply jotting your thoughts and your feelings down into your phone or into a bit of paper. It doesn't have to be fancy. Things like talking to people, talking to a friend or a trusted family member, or simply seeking professional help. Now, the third pitfall is judging yourself for having the emotion in the first place. So if you've ever found yourself saying, I shouldn't be feeling like this, then this is a form of self-judgment and self-criticism, and it's very unhelpful when we're experiencing painful feelings. And this can really contribute to an amplification of the emotion. It makes it worse. So the first thing to bear in mind here, and if you're multitasking, just pause for a moment because this is really important. All of your feelings are valid. All of your feelings deserve to be felt, even the painful ones. So when you are in a difficult moment and you're experiencing a painful emotion, try and think about what you would say to a friend if they were feeling this emotion and judging themselves for it. Now, I'm pretty sure that you would be able to come up with a few soothing, compassionate phrases that you would say to your friend. So try and say these to yourself the next time you notice that self-judgment is creeping in. And in episode 7 and episode 9 of the podcast, I talk a lot more about self-criticism and how to deal with it. So do go check those episodes out. So moving on, and the next one is intellectualizing emotions. So it's really common for people to intellectualize their emotions rather than fully experience them. So what do I mean by this? Well, intellectualizing may take the form of overthinking the emotion. So maybe spending lots of time trying to understand the root cause or why you feel that way, or having a really good intellectual understanding of the emotion, but not allowing yourself to feel it. Now, just to be clear, while understanding the cause of difficult emotions is important, it is not helpful when it's at the expense of actually allowing yourself to feel and experience them. So here is my tip with this. Try and notice when you are intellectualizing and instead name the emotion and ask yourself, where am I feeling this emotion in my body? Pitfall number 5, overusing distraction. So distraction can be a really helpful coping strategy, actually, in the short term, if used sparingly. And let's be honest, we all do this through various means, whether that's keeping super busy, overworking, having a glass of wine once the kids are asleep, gaming, shopping. I mean, the list could go on and on. And in fact, our brains are hardwired to move away from pain. It's a survival strategy. But when we use distraction a lot, it quickly becomes an avoidance strategy, which is not beneficial in the long term because it essentially prevents healthy processing of emotions. So my tip with this particular pitfall is to try and notice that urge to distract away from a painful emotion. And again, like I've said before, being able to notice it, being able to name it, that's all really important. But I think the added step here is this idea of being able to accept the emotion as it is, accept the feeling as it is. So learning to allow and sit with painful feelings is a really key skill in managing emotions, and it's akin to acceptance, this idea of acceptance. So you don't have to like the feeling, you don't have to want it to be there, like you don't want it there because it's painful, but this idea of I can just let it be here. And I talk about this a lot more in the free workbook, so do go check it out. Now, the last pitfall I'm going to talk about is assuming permanence of emotions. So when we are in the middle of what I call an emotional storm, when there's lots of painful emotions happening all at once, we often assume, and it can feel like that they are going to last forever and never, ever end. And believing that you will always feel a certain way is unhelpful and inaccurate. Emotions are transient. They come and they go, they shift and they change. Now, something that often shows up in therapy is someone might say, yeah, but I feel depressed all of the time, or I feel anxious all day. So feeling depressed and anxious is really tough. But our brains are great at giving us shortcuts, and that shows up in our language. So the word depressed, when we unpack that, what does it actually mean for a person? It might contain a lot of different emotions, for one thing. But also, if you were to really tune into those emotions, perhaps you would find sadness, frustration, hopelessness. And the interesting thing is that when you start to really observe your feelings and your emotions, you find that they do wax and wane, they shift throughout the day. Now, the shift might be very, very subtle. So subtle that you almost can't notice it. Let me give you an example with this. So maybe you're feeling at your lowest ebb, but there can be like a fleeting moment in your day where perhaps, I don't know, maybe you see a robin land on the patio outside. And for those few seconds, as you watch that robin, those feelings of sadness or hopelessness or whatever it is, ever so slightly become less heavy. Perhaps another emotion shows up too, maybe a feeling of contentment in that moment. But it's so fleeting that if you are not tuned into what you're feeling, you miss it. And the story of that day is I felt depressed all day. So what I'm getting at here is that when we develop the skill of being able to tune in to our emotions and to our feelings, what we find is that they do change, and they change with intensity as well. And that is often one of the first skills that I help people develop, is really being able to notice and observe and to get a language around their emotions. Because I think also the other thing that I notice is that we have the sort of primary emotions in our mind and we know what they are, but the really kind of subtle emotions, or the emotions that we're not quite used to experiencing or naming, don't really get a look in. So that's why an emotions wheel, which is a visual array of emotions, can be really helpful when you're trying to label and name the emotions that you're experiencing. And again, there's an emotions wheel in the freebie. So that brings us to the end of this episode. I do hope you found something useful in my discussion about emotions today. Remember to check out the download Managing Emotions workbook. I'll link that in the show notes. Thank you for listening to this episode of Hello Therapy. If you found it helpful, don't forget to subscribe, follow, and review. You can get more well-being and mental health tips by joining our email list and visiting the resources section of our website at harleyclinical.co.uk. The Hello Therapy podcast and the information provided by me, Dr. Liz White, is solely intended for information and educational purposes and does not constitute personalised advice. Please do reach out to your GP or a mental health professional if you need support. Until next time, take care of yourself.